I was standing on the sidewalk with 2 suitcases, my phone at 1%, and my own daughter staring at me through the glass door like I was a stranger, when she said the words I still hear in my nightmares. "Mom, this isn't your house anymore." My husband had been dead for 3 weeks, the will had just been read, and somehow, in less than a month, I went from being a wife and a mother to being homeless. Was I wrong for what I did next, or would you have done the same thing if your own child threw you out after inheriting everything your husband left behind? I need you to really understand how unreal this felt, because even now, telling this story, my hands are shaking. One moment I was grieving the love of my life, the man I had built everything with, and the next moment I was being told to leave the home I'd lived in for 27 years. And the worst part wasn't the cold air, or the weight of the suitcases, or the humiliation of neighbors pretending not to look. The worst part was that it was my daughter who locked the door. So, before you judge me for what happened later, please listen to how it all unfolded, because nothing about this was simple, and nothing about it stopped hurting. My husband, Robert, and I met when we were both painfully young and equally broke. I was 22, working 2 jobs and trying to finish night classes, and he was a junior accountant with more ambition than money. We built our life slowly, brick by brick. I supported him when he took risks at work, and he supported me when I left my job to raise our daughter, Emily. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. The kind of couple that people looked at and said, they'll grow old together. And for the most part we did, until cancer came into our lives like a thief and took him in less than a year. Emily was 19 when Robert got sick. She was in college, living at home to save money, and I thought that tragedy would bring us closer. Instead, it cracked something open in her that I didn't recognize at the time. She became distant, irritable, always on her phone, always complaining about how depressing the house felt. I tried to be patient. I told myself she was young and scared. I told myself grief looks different on everyone. But looking back now, I can see the entitlement growing quietly in her eyes. When Robert passed away, I felt like half of my body had been ripped out. I couldn't sleep in our bed. I couldn't eat. I walked around the house touching his things like they might still be warm. Emily cried at the funeral, but it felt performative, like she was acting the part of a grieving daughter instead of actually grieving. That should have been my first real warning sign. 2 weeks after the funeral, the lawyer called us in to read the will. I didn't think much of it. Robert and I had talked about it years ago. I assumed everything would be straightforward. The house, the savings, the investments, they were ours. Or so I thought. What I didn't know was that Robert had quietly changed his will 6 months before he died. He never told me. And when I found out why, it shattered something in me that I don't think will ever fully heal. According to the will, the majority of his estate, including the house, his business shares, and most of the liquid assets were left to Emily. I was left a living stipend. As the lawyer phrased it, enough to cover basic expenses, but nothing compared to what Robert had accumulated over decades. I remember sitting there, numb, while Emily's eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. She didn't even try to hide it. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll take care of you." And I believed her. God help me, I believed her. Later that night, I confronted Robert's memory, sitting alone in our bedroom, asking out loud why he would do this, why he would leave me so vulnerable. And after days of replaying every conversation, every argument, every moment from his final months, I realized the truth. He had been afraid. Afraid of what would happen to Emily if something happened to both of us. Afraid that I would remarry or make decisions he couldn't control. He loved me, but he loved control more. And he trusted our daughter to do the right thing. For a few days, Emily played the part of the generous benefactor. She ordered takeout, talked about renovating the house, mentioned investing in startups. She started referring to things as my house and my money, but always laughed afterward like it was a joke. I laughed too, even though it made my stomach twist. I didn't want conflict. I was too tired to fight. I just wanted peace. Then the comments started, small at first. Do you really need to keep all these old photos? Maybe you should downsize your clothes. You know, Mom, this house is way too big for just you. Every sentence was a needle, subtle but sharp. I tried to brush it off, telling myself she was stressed, that she didn't mean it the way it sounded. But deep down, I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. One evening, about 3 weeks after the will reading, Emily sat me down at the kitchen table. She had this calm, business-like tone that didn't sound like my daughter at all. She said she'd been thinking about her future, about independence, about starting fresh. Then she said, I think it would be healthier for both of us if you moved out. I laughed at first. I genuinely thought she was joking. When I realized she wasn't, my chest felt like it was caving in. I asked her where she thought I was supposed to go. She shrugged and said I could rent a small apartment, maybe closer to the city. I reminded her that I had given up my career to raise her, that this house was my home, that I was still grieving her father. Her face hardened, and that's when she said it. Dad left everything to me. Legally, it's my decision. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just stated it like a fact, like I was a problem to be solved. We argued for hours. I begged. I cried. I reminded her of bedtime stories, scraped knees, college applications. She accused me of guilt, tripping her. She said I was being dramatic. By the end of the night, she told me I had a week to leave. A week. After 27 years. I spent that week in a fog. Packing felt like erasing myself. Every object held a memory. Emily avoided me, staying out late, sleeping over at friends' places. On the final day, I packed 2 suitcases with essentials and stood by the door, hoping, praying she would stop me. She didn't. She watched silently as I stepped outside. Then she closed the door, locked it, and that's how I ended up on the sidewalk, homeless, heartbroken, and questioning everything I thought I knew about love and family. I stayed at a cheap motel that night, staring at the ceiling and replaying her words over and over. I kept asking myself where I went wrong. Was I a bad mother? Did I raise her to be this cold? Or had money simply stripped away whatever kindness she had left? I didn't sleep at all. By morning, something inside me had changed. Grief was still there, but it had mixed with something else. Something sharper, something steadier. The next day, I started making calls. I called an old friend who worked in finance. I called the lawyer again. I pulled out documents I hadn't looked at in years. Because here's the thing Emily didn't know, and what Robert never expected me to use. I wasn't as powerless as they thought. Not even close, and as I sat on that motel bed, holding my phone with shaking hands, I realized I had a choice to make. I could disappear quietly, or I could finally stand up for myself. So that was the situation I was in. Betrayed by my husband's will, thrown out by my own daughter, alone with nothing but questions and anger and 2 suitcases full of memories. Before I tell you what I did next, and how everything turned upside down in less than 48 hours, I want you to pause for a second and really think about it. If you were in my shoes, if your own child took everything and left you with nothing, what would you have done? Would you have walked away, or would you have fought back? 48 hours. That's all it took for my entire world to flip again, but this time, I wasn't the one standing on the sidewalk with suitcases. And before you decide whether I was cruel, heartless, or justified, I need you to hear exactly what happened after that motel night. Because this wasn't revenge planned in anger. This was survival mixed with truth that had been buried for years. So tell me honestly, after everything I went through, would you have done anything differently? That morning in the motel, I finally stopped crying. Not because the pain was gone, but because I was exhausted from bleeding emotionally. I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked, and for the first time since Robert died, I didn't see a widow or a victim. I saw a woman who had been underestimated by everyone around her, including the man she loved most. I took a deep breath, sat on the edge of that stiff motel bed, and started making calls. The first call was to Mark, an old friend from my early working years, before I became a stay-at-home mom. Before my entire identity revolved around supporting Robert and raising Emily, I worked in corporate compliance. I was good at it, very good. Mark and I had stayed loosely in touch over the years, birthday messages, occasional lunches. He answered on the second ring, surprised to hear my voice. And when I told him everything, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "You know you're not as empty-handed as she thinks, right?" At first, I thought he was just trying to comfort me. But then he reminded me of something Robert and I had done quietly, years ago. During one of his first big financial successes, we had set up a separate trust, not for Emily, not for me directly, for future contingencies, as Robert liked to call it. At the time, it felt unnecessary. Robert insisted. I signed the papers and forgot about it. That trust was in my name as co-trustee, not beneficiary. Co-trustee, which meant something very important. It meant I had legal authority. Authority Emily had no idea existed. My hands were shaking when Mark explained what that actually meant in plain language. It meant that while Emily inherited assets, she did not inherit control over everything. Certain holdings, including a significant portion of Robert's business interests, required trustee approval to liquidate or restructure. And guess who still had that approval? Me. I hung up and just sat there, staring at the wall. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't plotting. I felt sick. Because this wasn't about money to me. This was about being erased. But now I understood something clearly. Emily hadn't just thrown me out emotionally. She had done it strategically, believing she held all the power. And that belief was about to cost her more than she could imagine. Before I did anything else, I called the lawyer. The same one who read the will. His tone changed completely when I mentioned the trust. Suddenly, he was careful with his words, respectful. He confirmed everything Mark said, and then he told me something else, something that made my chest tighten. Emily had already contacted him, asking how quickly she could sell certain assets. Assets she legally could not touch without trustee consent. That night, Emily showed up at the motel. I didn't expect it. I opened the door and there she was, arms crossed, face tight with irritation instead of concern. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't apologize. She said, "We need to talk." Not, "Mom, are you okay?" Not, "I miss you." Just business, she had found out. Apparently, when her plans hit a legal wall, she started digging. And when she realized I wasn't as powerless as she thought, panic set in. She accused me of hiding things from her, of manipulating Dad behind her back. I just listened. For the first time in her life, I let her talk without interrupting, without soothing, without trying to fix her emotions. And as she ranted, something became painfully clear. She didn't feel guilty. She felt threatened. She demanded that I sign over my trustee authority. She said it was the fair thing to do. I asked her, very calmly, if she thought it was fair to throw her grieving mother out of her home. She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes. And said, "You're being dramatic again." That word, again, it snapped something inside me. I told her no. I told her I wasn't signing anything. I told her she had made her choices and now she would live with mine. She laughed, a short, sharp sound, and said, "You wouldn't dare." And then she said the sentence that sealed everything. "You need me more than I need you." She left after that, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I sat on the bed, heart racing, and realized that this wasn't just about inheritance anymore. This was about who Emily had become, or maybe who she always was, and I just refused to see it. The next day, I exercised my authority. I didn't drain accounts. I didn't do anything illegal or sneaky. What I did was pause every pending transaction Emily had initiated. I froze restructuring plans. I requested audits, perfectly within my rights. And then, with the lawyer present, I filed a formal request to review the conditions of the trust based on breach of fiduciary intent, which is a polite legal way of saying someone is acting like an irresponsible tyrant with money they didn't earn. By the end of that day, Emily's financial fantasy was collapsing. No immediate access, no quick cash, no flashy future. And for the first time, she had to face consequences. She called me nonstop. Voicemails shifted from angry to desperate in less than 12 hours. She accused me of ruining her life. She said I was punishing her for being independent. She even cried, real sobs this time, saying she was scared. And for a moment, just a moment, I almost caved. Because she was still my daughter. Because I remembered holding her as a baby, promising I'd protect her forever. But then I remembered the sidewalk, the locked door. The way she looked at me like I was an inconvenience. So that was the moment I paused and thought about you. The people listening to this story right now. If your own child did that to you, if they treated you like disposable trash once money entered the picture, what would you do? Would you forgive immediately? Or would you finally draw a line and say enough? Because here's what I did next. I didn't destroy her. I confronted her. We met in a neutral place, a cafe near the lawyer's office. She looked smaller somehow, less confident, like the weight of reality had finally settled on her shoulders. I told her everything. About the trust. About Robert's fear. About how deeply betrayed I felt by both of them. I told her that throwing me out wasn't just cruel, it was short-sighted. And then I told her the truth that hurt her the most. I told her I didn't recognize her anymore. She cried. For real this time. She admitted she thought money would fix everything. That she felt powerful for the first time in her life and didn't know how to handle it. She said she didn't think I'd actually leave, that she thought I'd fight harder. Let that sink in. She thought my love was supposed to override her cruelty. I told her love doesn't mean accepting abuse. The final decision was mine. I could keep everything locked down indefinitely, or I could offer a compromise. And this is where the surprise comes in. I agreed to release certain assets. But only under conditions. She had to attend financial counseling. She had to put a portion into a protected account she couldn't touch impulsively. And most importantly, she had to publicly acknowledge, legally, that the house was my residence for as long as I lived. She hesitated. Pride battled fear in her eyes. And then she nodded. 48 hours after she threw me out, I walked back into that house. Not as a guest, not as a beggar, but as someone who finally reclaimed her place. Emily moved out instead, not because I forced her to, but because she couldn't stand living under boundaries. And honestly, that told me everything I needed to know. The aftermath wasn't a fairy tale. Our relationship is cautious now, fragile. Some days we talk, some days we don't. I'm rebuilding my life slowly. I went back to consulting. I sleep better. I breathe easier. And for the first time in decades, I'm living for myself.